leader.
News Talk 1240.
Some rather disturbing developments now coming out about how to spy on somebody's computer. Apparently, it's actually, well, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easy if you have the right materials and the right amount of money, and you happen to work at a university in Tel Aviv, then you can spy on somebody's laptop remotely, wirelessly even. Well, apparently security researchers have figured out how to hack into laptops using what they're calling pita bread and radio, according to Business Insider. So researchers at Tel Aviv University have come up with a clever way to hack into laptops using a radio receiver and a piece of pita bread. Now, I mean pita bread as in like actual, real, honest-to-goodness pita bread that you would buy at any store. The researchers published their findings online, showing that many laptop models give off electromagnetic radiation that can be manipulated into revealing the passwords that are stored on laptops. Laptops running encryption programs could be fooled into revealing passwords when sent encrypted passages of text, and laptops would then encrypt the data, and researchers use components from a radio to pick up the changes in electromagnetic radiation as a laptop CPU works. Now, that sounds kind of far-fetched, right? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. That sounds like something you'd see on NCIS, where there are two people typing on the same keyboard to little to no effect. And it sounds like something that you'd see on some TV show where they don't actually know anything about computers. Well, actually, it appears that this could be a real, honest-to-goodness, no joke, for real, not kidding, way to hack into somebody's computer. The laptop on the right of the picture, which they have on Business Insider, shows a display which has what looks like a standard SDR readout. SDR is software-defined radio. You can buy a small USB card to work with SDR. In fact, fun fact, you can get what's called it's USB OTG. I think it's on the go. It's a plug that plugs into the bottom of your phone. It only works if you have an Android phone, by the way. Plugs into the bottom of your phone. It's a USB device, and on the other end is just a female USB end, right? So now you've converted it so you can plug your phone into a regular USB device. From that, you plug into a USB TV tuner. Okay, you following me? You plug into a USB TV tuner, which has an antenna on it, and then you are able to use special drivers on your Android phone in order to listen to radio. And shortwave, VLF, I think you can do with the right antenna, and FM and AM as well. So a really cool device called software-defined radio, and that's what it appears this device is doing. So essentially, it's SDR working in a entirely different way than we're used to. So the laptop on the picture on Business Insider is displaying a spectrogram of the data that's received by pita bread. The data is then stored on a micro SD card, much like what you have in your phone, which can be either accessed via Wi-Fi or manually retrieved. Researchers can then look at the graph and decipher the password from the change in the signal. Now, presumably, they had to study a laptop running normally for a very long time with one of these devices in order to determine what it's like when a laptop is running normally, basically, so they could then detect changes as changes and not just continuance of regular operation with a laptop. Pita bread is used to disguise the components used in the hack, meaning that it could be carried out in a restaurant or a coffee shop without the target knowing. It does not take hours to crunch the data and get the password either. Researchers say that the hack can show a password within a few seconds. Now, when they're referring to pita bread, they actually do mean regular old pita bread. The idea is that this device is roughly the same size as a round piece of pita bread, so that it can be hidden inside a piece of bread. No, I'm not kidding. That sounds like something out of a spy movie. It sounds like something out of the Get Smart movie with Steve Carell and I think Anne Hathaway. It sounds like something out of that, but it's really not. This is not James Bond. This is actually something that somebody at Tel Aviv University came up with. So go figure. Kind of an odd occurrence that's happening in the world of tech. Now, this is not actually anything new. If you watched Tech TV in the 90s, which I didn't because I was too young, but I watched tapes of it. If you watched Tech TV in the 90s, you may remember there was a segment where they were doing exactly the same thing, where they were picking up people's monitors for the CRT monitors, signals, and they could actually replicate what was on somebody's CRT monitor, just monitoring the electromagnetic frequencies that were radiating off of that monitor. It doesn't work so great anymore because almost everyone is using LCD monitors, which don't put off nearly enough radiation to be detected from a distance. But nevertheless, if you're running a CRT monitor, that actually can be picked up with a specialized radio device. So it's kind of weird. It's not something you'd think of, and I'm sure the NSA has a much better way of picking up signals than that, but it actually can be done. The only way to prevent that from happening is to put your laptop in a Faraday cage, which, well, then you wouldn't be able to pick up Wi-Fi. So you come across a few problems there. A Faraday cage, by the way, it's literally a cage made out of copper wiring, which blocks electromagnetic frequencies from getting to whatever's inside that cage. So it's really weird to think about, but it works. Believe it or not, it works. I've said for a long time, the only way to actually secure your house from spying would be to not have internet, not ever use a phone, including a cell phone, and to have your house inside a Faraday cage. That would be the only way, and to also have blackout windows or no windows whatsoever, and soundproof your entire house and all that sort of thing. That's really the only way to secure your house. But yeah, it's a pretty complicated process. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240. Hot News Talk Radio. We are also streaming live on YouTube 24/7. Well, not 24/7, but whenever a show is on. We're streaming live on YouTube. Sometimes we leave it on and it's 24/7. Streaming live on YouTube, where you can watch all of our different shows that are local, so you can see the hosts as they're talking, including myself. I'm broadcasting live right now on YouTube. So all you got to do to watch that is go to YouTube and search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you'll be able to see me in wearing a Red Supre t-shirt today, and my messed up hair because I just had a shower a few hours ago. So you can see that, and you can also see David Toulis when he comes in, where he's always wearing a bow tie. He's always very well dressed. David Toulis is, and he shows Nuganomics.com. He's always extremely well dressed, and I don't know how he does it. I'm a naturally very messy person, so whenever I see somebody who's just well dressed every day, I think, how do they pull that off? I could not do that. You know, how do you wake up every morning and you tie a tie and you put on your slacks and you put on your leather shoes, which always hurt my feet because I have big feet, and you walk out the door, and I don't know how people do that. How do people do that? That just drives me nuts. Where people are always, they look good every day, and I can't pull that off. I don't pull off the looking good look very well. So my alternative is I go for heroin chic. Actually, that's my look, heroin chic. If you don't know what heroin chic is, watch any Nirvana video and you've got it. Well, anyway, this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and we have a lot of great programming. One of which, of course, is Nuganomics.com with David Toulis, which is on from 1 to 3 right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We also have Imus in the Morning, Laura Ingram as well, and my show is Digital Drive, which is what you're listening to right now. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. Also, we have the weather and the news at 5 with Hot News Now, right before or right after Sean Hannity, and before Sean Hannity as well, because it comes on after, right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Time, by the way, is 12:15 right now at the studio location here. And if you're looking to get a top quality used car for $2,000 or less sometimes than the other lots, there's a really unpretentious little car lot just east of Central High School on Highway 58. Louis has no overhead, no staff, and he does everything himself, and he passes the savings on to you. So everyone can get a car and rebuild credit. That's Louis at Automax at 643-2886. That's 643-2886. Ask for Louis at Automax, and he'll certainly help you out. Let him know that you heard about him here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Now we're looking again at the news, where actually quite a lot is going on. Facebook has facial recognition now. Believe it or not, Facebook. Facial recognition, not something you think of when you think of Facebook. So Facebook's facial recognition software will someday find you even while you're facing away. So Facebook, according to Ars Technica, has researchers who have unveiled new research that allows for faces to be more easily recognized based on their contextual information, such as hairstyle, clothing, and body shape. The research, which was published at rxiv.org in January 2015, was presented at a conference in Boston earlier this month and first reported by New Scientist on Monday. According to the researchers, the system, which is dubbed the Pose Invariant Person Recognition Technology, or PIPER, is accurate 83% of the time, which is actually far higher than the current state of the art, which primarily requires clear full frontal photos to work well. And it requires optimal lighting. There's all sorts of things that have to be in place for current facial recognition software to work properly. So it leads to some problems. We'll put it that way. I'm sure the state of the art that the government has access to is actually much better than the state of the art which we have access to. To put things into perspective, what do you think of when you think of the integrated circuit, the microchip? You probably think of your computer, right? Well, when did the microchip first get invented is the question. Well, actually, it was the 50s or 60s when the integrated circuit was really being looked at, and it was invented by Intel, which at the time was called integrated electronics. So quite a few people worked on it. Texas Instruments and Intel were working neck and neck to try to develop the perfect chip, which at the time was then developed by Intel, or integrated electronics. At least that's what you think, but that's actually not true. Unfortunately, for those involved, they truly did think that they had created the first integrated circuit. So did the public. But unfortunately for them, the first integrated circuit had actually been invented by the military, the U.S. military, for use in fighter jets to calculate telemetry data. So believe it or not, the first microchip was actually developed in the 1950s for the Air Force for use in fighter jets, which would take in telemetry information. So it's weird to think of, and I don't know who was contracted to make that microchip. I think that's still classified, actually. But believe it or not, the first microchip was actually made for the military, not by Integrated Electronics. Shocking. I was astounded when I found that out, because I had just watched a documentary about Intel, and what a fascinating story it is. It really is one of the most fascinating stories, probably in computer history, just to read about the whole the whole founding of Intel and how they were disgruntled people from Bell Labs and all sorts of really just interesting, fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff came out of Intel. Definitely worth looking into. So look up the story of Intel someday. Intel actually is short for Integrated Electronics, not intelligence, believe it or not. Well, the authors of the study for this Piper system, the pose invariant person recognition software, says that while each poslet is not as powerful as custom designed face recognizer, it leverages weak signals from specific pose patterns that are hard to capture otherwise. By combining their predictions, we accumulate the subtle discriminative information coming from each part into a robust pose-independent person recognition to the state-of-the-art face recognition system by using deep convolutional nets. Most of the existing face recognition systems require constrained settling of frontal faces and explicit 3D face alignments or facial some systems to deal with varying illumination, occlusion, and disguise. Due to our unconstrained setting, most of conventional face recognition systems have limited performance on our data set, so they say. So it's a very odd and complex thing when we're talking about facial recognition. It's a field that is not as well studied as you might think. Facial recognition technology is not anywhere close to being finished. It's not anywhere close to being as optimal as it could be, like how fingerprint scanners are, where you can just scan a fingerprint and pretty much its fingerprint scans are as good as they're going to get at this point. Facial recognition, however, is taking a long time to get fully optimized because it works in an optical sense. It's not like a two-dimensional scan for a fingerprint where you pretty much just take a two-dimensional image and scan it for differences based on other fingerprints. With a facial recognition device, you have to take a 3D image and you have to balance that against or test that against other faces which are already in the database. Lots of people's faces actually look a lot similar. It's a really complicated process. So it leads to a lot of problems, shall we say, when you're trying to build the better mousetrap when it comes to facial recognition software. Well, Comcast has been getting a lot of complaints to the FCC, rather. The FCC has been getting a lot of complaints about Comcast, would be the proper way to word that. So some are saying that if you want a lower Comcast bill, you can complain to the FCC and you may just receive one. Broadband providers, I should say, are probably fielding some new complaints now that the Federal Communications Commission has begun accepting formal objections under its new net neutrality rules. And it seems that they're responding quickly. Two customers, one of Comcast and one of Time Warner Cable, told Ars Technica that the cable providers gave them price breaks last week, shortly after they complained to the FCC about what they claim are unfair billing practices. These two complaints weren't about net neutrality violations, but both customers we talked to, or rather Ars Technica talked to, seemed to be spurred into action by the FCC expanding its complaint system. Moreover, the FCC's net neutrality order also reclassified broadband providers as common carriers, allowing for penalties if their billing practices are unjust or unreasonable. The FCC has not said exactly what constitutes unjust or unreasonable pricing as of yet. So it seems, it seems like people are using an unfair tactic on Comcast and on these providers, you might say, because complaining to the FCC seems like sort of a low blow if you think that your billing is incorrect. I don't know if that's their first step. I don't know if that's what they did first, if they went to the FCC first and said, hey, my billing's not right, or if they went to Comcast and said, hey, my billing's not right, can you fix it? And then if it wasn't fixed, then they went to the FCC. I don't know what the process was for that, so I can't really speak to that. However, customers could already complain about billing before net neutrality took effect. But the FCC now has more power to make sure that they're being treated fairly, and internet providers have more reason to take the complaint seriously. So yet again, we have an example of the FCC, or rather not just the FCC, but any government entity taking a position which they've no right to take, and it's really leading to quite a few problems for these carriers. And it makes you wonder if Comcast and other such carriers are going to have to raise their rates as a result, and if they're going to have to raise their billing prices as a result in order to deal with all the penalties that they may or may not have to pay to the FCC. So it's going to lead to a whole lot of problems for a lot of these different carriers. Nevertheless, no matter what angle the FCC decides to take, it's going to lead to quite a few problems for the carriers regardless, because anytime there's any sort of government intervention in business, you're always going to see problems. For instance, what we're seeing now in healthcare is leading to people actually not getting the proper health treatment they need. It's just a overall messed up situation for healthcare here in the States. Nobody would deny that healthcare needed to be fixed, right? Like nobody's going to say, no, the healthcare system was fine as it was, but it's not coming out as nearly as well as we would like, because the healthcare system is still not nearly fixed, and we still have tons of government intervention in our healthcare system, and it's just leading to a whole bunch of problems. Now, the solution is, of course, options like QuickSurge, where you can go to QuickSurge and it's a nice little surgery clinic, and you can actually get what you want done, and you can pay cash, and there's no insurance. So you just get what you want done, and that's it. So David Red runs QuickSurge, and it's his walk-in surgery clinic on North Shore in the Publix Center. So it's in the Publix area. He does moles, skin tags, cuts, lacerations over at QuickSurge. He does not take insurance because he takes cash customers. He has super low and fixed prices. He'll take a credit card or check or cash, and the prices are not any sort of secret. You can find his prices online. It's hassle-free and pain-free, and you can get a personal relationship with your doctor. You can actually talk to him like a human being. The national Medicare system is totally dysfunctional. It's overpriced and very impersonal. Dr. David Red, however, is part of the solution, and so are you. That's quicksurge.com. That's QUIKSURG.com if you want to get relief. So that's one solution to the healthcare problem which we have. Because really the healthcare situation here in the States is not very good. You keep hearing examples of countries such as Sweden where they say, oh, I can just walk into a surgery clinic, or I can just walk into a hospital and I get treated right then and there. The problem with that, though, is that taxes are 50-60% in countries such as Sweden. Now, if you volunteer for that and you're fine with that, hey, who am I to argue? However, I don't really want to pay 50 to 60% of my income in tax. So what's the option? Well, surgery clinics such as QuickSurge are the option that we have now, where you can actually get what you want done at a reasonable price, and you don't have to worry about the whole insurance government intervention system like we have in countries such as Sweden, such as in the UK, even Canada to a much lesser extent. We have problems with the healthcare system in these countries where it's sustainable only because people are somehow willing to give up more than half of their income in order to pay for these systems for everyone else. We don't have that mindset here in the States, though. We don't have any sort of mindset like that, where everyone is willing to pay for everyone else. We don't have that here in the States. Instead, what we have is a every man for himself mindset and very much an individualistic mindset here in the States, and especially in the South, where we're very individualistic. We want to do things for ourselves, and most of us don't want help. So it's almost a point of pride how we never ask for help and we don't go to the doctor until it's last resort, as sort of a point of pride for a lot of people here in the South. And that's partially why the healthcare system isn't working. And the other reason why the healthcare system isn't working is because of endless bureaucracy. So lots of things culminate to lead to a very poor problem. However, technology and people such as David Redd are helping to fix the problem. So without the government's help, we are solving the problem of healthcare, and we're solving quite a few other problems as well. This is Digital Drive right here on Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great, supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas, every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. A Confederate flag comes down in Alabama on orders from its governor.
The flag was not flying on the Capitol building itself. It's a setup very similar to one being debated in South Carolina. The Alabama Memorial still has 3 other Confederate-era flags displayed, but their view is obstructed by trees. Bentley told reporters this morning the Charleston shooting helped persuade his decision.
Fox Radio's Evan Brown, convicted Boston Marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev, hearing from some of his victims at his formal sentencing.
Restaurant manager Crystal Campbell's mother telling Tsarnaev, "What you did to my daughter was disgusting. The dad of 8-year-old Martin Richard, who, with his wife, had publicly campaigned for life in prison, saying Tsarnaev could have stopped his brother. He chose to do nothing.
Fox Radio's Bill Marcus outside the federal courthouse in Boston, and Ford launches a car-sharing pilot in 6 U.S. cities and London for customers that finance their vehicles through Ford Motor Credit. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Man, there's a lot of controversy, isn't there? Tons of controversy floating around recently, in recent months, recent days even. Lots of controversy. People getting mad about, like, nonsense, really. You know? Like, I don't get why people get so upset about what I consider to be little things. Maybe it's because I'm a very privileged white, straight male. Maybe that's why I don't get a lot of things, but I'm not sure I understand the controversy surrounding a lot of things. Like, you can fly the USSR flag in your backyard. I don't care. You can do what you want, man. Big deal. I've actually, no joke, seen people who have, like, the ISIS flag on their t-shirt. I don't care. Fine, do that. Big deal. You know? Like, people just get so upset about, like, just nonsense, petty nonsense. That's what it seems like to me, anyway. And again, I know the Confederate flag issue is a really hot button issue for quite a few people. Perhaps people not either not knowing or knowing and thinking it's wrong. The history of the CSA and all sorts of little things add up. But I don't know. It seems like this is not as big of an issue as the media seems to be making it. That's sort of why I haven't really talked about it a whole lot. Also because it has nothing to do with anything. But it's one of those things that sort of bugs me about how you watch news a lot. You know, if you're like me, you watch the news quite a lot, and you see all these little things that just aren't really that big of a deal when it comes right down to it. Because, like, okay, South Carolina is flying a historical flag, which is actually the wrong flag to be flying anyway. If you're going to fly a Confederate flag, we're not at war anymore, so that's the wrong one. But they should be flying the Grand National flag, which is a completely different flag from the Stars and Bars battle flag that you see. But good luck telling anybody that. You know, people think that there's only one Confederate flag. People think there's only one American flag. Yeah, people don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, yeah, no, it just drives me nuts how you watch the news and you think there's so much more interesting stuff going on. Like the Chinese economy is not doing so great right now. You know, the Chinese stock market took a really big hit a few days ago, and nobody's talking about that. You know, people have been selling off bonds like crazy. Nobody's talking about that. There's massive computer scandals too. Nobody wants to talk about that. Why not? Why doesn't anyone want to talk about these very important, very pressing issues of, say, the NSA hacking into our computers without any sort of warrant? How is that not a big deal? For some reason, it's not to a lot of these news directors who work at these different news agencies, these big cable news stations. They don't really want to talk about the big, actual, real issue, which is government surveillance, which is government abuse, which is crony capitalism is, of course, another problem we have. Nobody really wants to talk about that because the news agencies are owned by crony capitalists who have news directors who are paid very much to ignore these issues, and you have reporters who don't actually know what they're talking about, and you have anchors who only read what's on a teleprompter. So that's why we have an uninformed public, for the most part. Now, you're listening to Hot News Talk Radio. You're not going to get that treatment here because we don't mess around. I'm news director here at Hot News Talk Radio, and if there's something that is actually important, you can bet your britches we're going to be talking about it. For instance, we have NSA and more NSA abuses, with WikiLeaks publishing a top secret NSA brief showing that the U.S. spied on France. That's a big deal. The U.S. spied on France. You can't get a much bigger deal than that when we're talking about foreign policy, but you're not going to hear about that probably on Fox or CNN or CS or MSNBC or CNBC or any of the cable news stations. You're not going to hear about that. Well, WikiLeaks actually did publish top secret NSA briefs showing that the U.S. spied on France, according to Ars Technica. So on Tuesday, WikiLeaks published 5 top secret documents definitively showing that the National Security Agency has been spying on French President Francois Hollande and his 2 immediate predecessors, Nicolas Sarkozy and Jacques Chirac, which is a cool name, among other top officials. So the documents, as WikiLeaks released them, include excerpts of 5 intelligence briefs that contain descriptions of what was intercepted, taken from various editions of the National Security Agency's top secret global SIGINT highlights executive briefings. The wording suggests that WikiLeaks has been even more or rather has even more complete intelligence briefs than it did not publish, which is an unusual move for the group. WikiLeaks also published a chart showing a list of redacted phone numbers of those officials. One, which was dated March 24th, 2010, includes notes from a conversation between two top French officials. So we can reasonably assume that we have a little bit of proof that these French officials have been spied on, since we have conversations between them. And one of them is this. It's titled "Sensitive Issues on the Agenda When French U.S. Presidents Meet Next Week in Washington." Okay, so here's the body of that text. It's not very long. French President Sarkozy intends to raise a number of sensitive topics with the U.S. president when the two leaders meet in Washington on the 31st of March, according to an exchange last week between the French ambassador in Washington, Pierre Vimont, and Sarkozy's diplomatic advisor, Jean-David Levitte, perhaps. Vimont conveyed that the French president will express his frustration that Washington has backed away from its proposed bilateral intelligence cooperation agreement, and Sarkozy intends to continue to push for closure. As Vimont and Levitte understand it, the main sticking point is the U.S. desire to continue spying on France. Well, why are we spying on France? Perhaps is a question that needs to be asked now. Last I checked, we were actually on quite good terms with France. Remember, they gifted us with the Statue of Liberty. The United States and France seem to have a shared interest in liberty. After all, it's one of the tenets of the French liberation movement, the French Revolution, which, of course, didn't go quite as nicely as the American Revolution went. But nevertheless, that's all history now. And you'd think that the French would be quite good allies of the United States, and indeed are. People get upset, of course, at France for not getting involved in the Iraq War. I see that as a good thing, actually, that France did not get involved in the Iraq War. Remember that whole, just on a side note, do you remember that whole controversy back in 2003 when the United States got into the Iraq War? The French wouldn't, and props to them for not. But there were some senators and lawmakers and such in Washington who are so upset that they stopped calling French fries and started calling them freedom fries. I kid you not. That's an actual thing that happened. The cafeteria and on Capitol Hill, they stopped serving French fries and started serving freedom fries, which were precisely the exact same thing. However, they were called another thing because we were mad at the French. Oh my gosh, how petty can we get? Well, that much anyway. It's really annoying when you think about it, how petty we are when we get all upset, all of these other countries, for not following along with our rhetoric, pretending that we're the most important thing ever, and getting annoyed when other countries don't march in step with our ideology. Well, the intelligence briefs pulled from the NSA reports called Global SIGINT Highlights give some clues as to how the intelligence they contain was collected. The unconventional label suggests that they leveraged means other than standard phone intercepts and may have exploited the tools of the NSA's Tailored Access Office, or TAO. They also correspond to the period during which President Sarkozy's office was attacked by Flame malware that was known to have infiltrated computers in President Sarkozy's office in May of 2012. WikiLeaks media partners, Liberation and Mediapart, I'm sure it's the French pronunciation, so Liberation and Mediapart, did not explain the provenance of the documents. Claude Gaunt, who was Interior Minister under Sarkozy, described the eavesdropping as scandalous, as quoted by Mediapart. Scandalous is a very light way to put it, actually. Scandalous would be, that's very gentle in wording. Scandalous would be a very gentle way to put it. Scandalous is the Caitlyn Jenner issue, right? Scandalous is the Confederate flag issue. This is much more than that. This is, it's an international policy fiasco. It's a disaster. It's illegal. It's wrong. It's a moral oversight. It's not a scandal. Scandal is a lot more trivial than that. Well, Mr. Claude, we'll call him, says that it's scandalous, having been quoted by Mediapart. The French government must react as it sees fit, he said, which could be any way at all or not at all. As a minimum, it requires an explanation at the very highest level, an absolute commitment to put an end to these practices. So we've managed to make the French very mad at us for our alleged, anyway, illegal spying. And what are we going to do about it? What are the French going to do about it? Well, who knows, actually? I have no idea what the French are going to do about it, other than perhaps a strongly worded document to be sent to the president for his immediate perusal. Further than that, I don't know. Nobody knows really at this point, other than those who are sitting in the offices in France and those who are sitting in the offices in Capitol Hill. We don't know. There's no way to know until it happens. The French government must react as it sees fit, so whatever that will be. Neither French media outlet received an on-the-record comment from officials in the Élysée Palace, but Hollande apparently has called a sudden meeting. Pardon my French, by the way. Literally, I'm terrible at French. I did learn a little bit of it. I took a few classes in French, and I know very, very little. My pronunciation is, I'm sure, terrible. If you speak French and you're listening to me, you're probably cringing very hard. In fact, somebody who's very, very well read and is, in fact, bilingual is David Toulis, and his show is Nuganomics.com, and he has it right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He does speak French, and he's probably cringing in his seat as he's listening to me now, trying to pronounce a lot of these French terms, but his show is Nuganomics.com with David Toulis. He's a very well-read, very well-educated person, and he's not very well-schooled. There's an important difference. Not very well-schooled, but he is very well-educated. And his show is Nuganomics.com with David Toulis right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. The reason I say he's not very well-schooled is because David Toulis thinks differently than those who are schooled, because he thinks for himself. People who have been schooled will think very much in the same way other people think. People who have been educated tend to think for themselves. If you're educated, you learn critical thinking. If you're educated, you learn nonlinear thinking. You can come to conclusions for yourself. If you've been schooled, you've already been told the conclusions. So you don't really need to learn, you see. And that's what the difference. And if you've been schooled, you've been told the end already. You don't really have to figure out the story for yourself. You've already been told the end, but it might not necessarily be the right end. And that's the difference between schooling and education. I like to think I've been rather well educated. I've never actually been in a classroom. That's sort of a point of pride for me. Never set foot in a classroom, and I've never been to school at any point in my life. I visited one. I'll put it that way. I visited a college one time, but I've never actually attended a class. Well, Mediapart is reporting on the fiasco that we have now in public relations and in foreign policy with France, saying presidential sources did, however, note that ahead of the meeting between Francois Hollande and American President Barack Obama in Washington on February the 11th, 2014, and then during the meeting itself, there was an undertaking to no longer carry out indiscriminate eavesdropping of the state services of an allied country. That is something to keep in mind. We are allied with France. This has been evidenced by their involvement in the Vietnam War and our assistance of them during the Vietnam War. We have a quite good history with France. The French helped us out during the American Revolution. The French have been quite good friends of ours for many, many years now, and it seems a little bit irresponsible to threaten that friendship with actions such as these. The NSA did not immediately respond to Ars Technica's request for comment. It's not surprising. They emailed Ars Technica saying, "We do not comment on information from allegedly leaked documents." So they won't even admit really that the documents have been leaked. They just say allegedly leaked documents. And perhaps I should too, in all fairness. Similarly, Ned Price, a spokesperson with the National Security Agency, or rather National Security Council, told Ars Technica that his agency would not comment on specific intelligence allegations. As a general matter, he says, "We do not conduct any foreign intelligence surveillance activities unless there is a specific and validated national security purpose," he wrote by email. This applies to ordinary citizens and world leaders alike. In a follow-up email, Price added, "We are not targeting and will not target the communications of President Hollande." So that means are not now and will not in the future, but does not mean anything in the past tense. So they could very well have been hacking President Hollande 2 hours ago, but will not 2 hours from now. We don't know. There's no way to know, although it's rather well worded, their statement. It always is. Whenever the NSA comes out with a statement, whenever any government agency comes out with a statement, it's always very well worded. Never will you find a spelling error in a government statement because it's been so well analyzed and put through so many filters and so many people have had it on their desk that it really can't possibly have any spelling errors, because if it did, somebody would be fired. A cop has now been accused of exposing himself, and he's facing jail time now for a dash cam tampering. According to these reports, 37-year-old New Jersey cop has been accused of exposing his genitalia to a young male motorist that he allegedly pulled over, and he has accepted a plea deal in which the officer loses his job in exchange for pleading guilty to tampering with his patrol car's dash cam to conceal unprofessional and inappropriate conduct, according to these reports. The Newton Police Department officer, Jason Miller, this is the defendant in this case, is now accused of exposing himself, and he's going to be facing 60 days in jail at his August 7th sentencing hearing. Miller remains free on $35,000 bail and was nabbed after the authorities began investigating anonymous tips from young male motorists last year. Motorists being plural, indicating that there's more than one person involved in this, or more than two, I should say, involved in this, other than the officer in question and the alleged victim. So you have the defendant in this case. We don't know if he's guilty or not. It's not been determined. We have the defendant in this case, and we have the victim in this case. So the 14-year-old veteran's misdemeanor guilty plea last week comes as police departments nationwide are seeking to expand the use of dash cams and body cameras in a bid to both become more transparent with the public and to shield themselves from false allegations of abuse. The stock of Taser, one of the leading body cam companies, is at near 52-week high as police departments gobble up the surveillance technology. So you might have said that 6 weeks ago, perhaps 6 months ago, an investment in the Taser company would have been a very good investment. You would have made quite a lot of money had you put some money into Taser. But I would not put any money into the stock market ever at all, because it seems to be quite a poor idea looking in the grand scheme of things. I've noticed that, though. As time goes by, I've noticed that people say, why didn't I buy money in this company? And then the next week, the company takes a record 5-year hit. So buying money in the stock market does not seem like a very good idea. Well, meanwhile, some of Officer Miller's alleged flashing incidents were captured by grainy dash cam footage. One victim said that he was pulled over twice in the same night by Officer Miller. According to court documents, quote, during the motor vehicle stop of AB, I'm not giving his full name, it appears that Officer Miller's zipper is open and you can see what appears to be his, male organ. During the stop of KK, another person, the audio on the MVR unit was off and you could not hear what was said. From the video of this stop, it appears Officer Miller's zipper is open, and both of these stops occurred during the early morning hours when it was dark out. So in all fairness, we don't really know for sure what occurred. We have testimony. We have counter testimony from the officer involved in this particular case, the defendant in this case, and we have very grainy dash cam video. Some of these things you can gather conclusions from, sure, but again, grainy video, we don't know for sure. So it's all up to a jury in this case. The reason I say all that is to say this: I am, to some degree or another, questioning of police authority at all times. I'm not rude to them. There's no reason to be rude to police officers. Certainly, they want to get home to their families, and I wish they would. I'm happy that they're able to safely. And those who aren't, certainly that's a shame. So you should never be rude to anyone. That's really not a very good option. That's not the optimal course of action. Being rude to somebody really doesn't get you anywhere. But I am questioning. I always ask questions. I'm a very questioning person. I'm a very questionable person. You can ask me questions if you want to. I think that people should be treated fairly. And that's why I read that story, because we don't know really what happened in this case. It could be an innocent incident. We don't know. Or it could be malicious. We don't know. The defendant in this case is currently in trial and will be determined by a jury. So everything must be fair when you're reporting. Fair reporting is absolutely necessary. And we aren't really seeing that a lot when it comes to TV news, when it comes to radio news even. We're not seeing very fair reporting. And it drives me nuts as both a news director and as a reporter and anchor to some degree. It drives me crazy when I see all these different reports and how either wrong or accusatory they are. Because you see all these different reports, right? I mean, you've watched the news, sure. You see all these different reports. Take, for instance, Dylan Roof, the suspect currently, the defendant in the shooting case in Charleston, South Carolina. He's not been convicted. So he's not a convicted killer. He's a defendant presently in this case. I can't say he's guilty because I don't know. It's not been determined yet by a jury. But we keep seeing all these different reports acting as though he is in fact guilty, when really that's highly irresponsible, because it's entirely possible, although unlikely, that he'll be declared innocent by a jury. If that happens, then a lot of these different news sources could be sued for libel. So you have to be very, very, very careful. And again, anyone who's on trial who's not been declared guilty is innocent until proven guilty. You have to be very careful in these particular cases. And he is still a defendant in this case, not guilty, not innocent, is defendant. He's innocent until proven guilty. That's just how it is. That's accurate reporting. That's fair reporting. We're not seeing a whole lot of that these days. eBay has banned, according to Ars Technica, the sale of the Confederate flag and other items bearing what they're calling racist icons. On Tuesday, eBay announced that it will be immediately banning all Confederate flags and items bearing the flag image. The move comes in the wake of recent South Carolina shooting that left 9 people dead at the Emmanuel AME Church a historic black church in Charleston. Surely this is a tragic incident. The suspect, Dylan Roof, appeared in several pre-incident photos with Confederate flags, and he left what some are calling a racist manifesto, allegedly anyway, on his website. On Tuesday, the governor of Virginia announced that it would begin the process of removing the optional Confederate battle flag from specialized license plates. And one day earlier, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley called for it to be removed from the state capitol as well. When Ars Technica searched for a Confederate flag on eBay at 12:45 Central Time, there was still 1,400 listings available. Just 15 minutes later, that number dropped to 1,388. It takes time to implement these things anyway. eBay came out with a statement saying, "We are taking action immediately and will first block new listings and notify sellers of current listings that their items will be removed by eBay," says Johanna Hoff, eBay spokesperson, told Ars Technica via email, saying, "As you can imagine, with a global marketplace of around 800 million items, removal will take some time. However, we are taking action today and beginning the process." The company has already banned most Nazi and Nazi-related items, but stamps, currency, and historically accurate model kits are, of course, accepted. So presumably you could buy Nazi silver Reich marks, which would actually be kind of interesting. They said, "We don't allow items that promote or glorify hatred, violence, racial, sexual, or religious intolerance, or promote organizations with such views." They also say we'll remove listings that graphically portray graphic violence or victims of violence unless they have substantial social, artistic, or political value. So copies of Postal are totally free to buy on eBay. It's one of those things where, on the one hand, I don't necessarily agree with their decision at all. You know, I had ancestors who fought for the Confederacy, I should say. One of which injured at the Battle of Siege of Vicksburg, by the way. Kind of a story I like to tell people. But yeah, I have on both sides actually ancestors who fought for different sides in the Civil War. My mother's side fought for the Union. My father's side fought for the Confederacy. Injured in the Battle of Vicksburg, and then married actually his comrade's not divorcee, but his comrade's widow to take care of her kids. So I do have a little bit of attachment to the Confederate movement for sure. But again, as a libertarian, I have to say that eBay does have a right to remove those particular items if they so choose. Of course, you can do that. Of course, it's eBay's decision as a business to make these sorts of calls. If eBay wants to potentially lose money by removing these items from its website, certainly eBay can do that. So I'm not going to say, eBay, how dare you? You know, eBay, how could you ever do such a thing? But no, it's a business. eBay runs itself as a business. Rightly, it should. So if the people at eBay want to remove this item, more power to them. I'm a free marketer. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm a libertarian. I certainly believe that you have a right to do that if you so choose. So it's really not an issue of do they have the right to sell it? Of course they do. But do they have a right to remove it from their website as well? Of course they do. Folks over at eBay can do whatever they want. So that's just how it is, man. That's just the nature of it. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few minutes right here on Hot News Talk Radio. It's a show where he talks about local economy and free market from his own very Nuga-centric position. It's the idea that you should be buying locally instead of nationally, I should say. He's an English major. He'll cut my head off. Locally instead of nationally, because it's really the best option. The national economy is bound to collapse. It has to. But the local economy really can't, because to do so, that would mean everyone in your local area would have to suddenly disappear and stop selling things. And that's really not going to happen. The local economy is much stronger than the national one. That's why you should buy locally.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the matter? Don't worry, just relax. You need a car. Come to Auto Life.